Hello again, this is Rundlii Gaming. We will be going over yet another deck of ones that I've created that have a particular idea and kind of work from there as to do a particular objective. In this one, it's going to be what I call the Polymorph Deck or the Shapeshifter deck. The goal of this one is basically to cheat in a big creature. Now, the deck itself runs 2 Blight Steals, which, if you wanted to be a little bit more creative with it, you could very well put just about any type of creature you want in there, and then the deck still works just like normal. When these were in Standard, back when I played during the Onslaught block, they were able to kind of put in whatever answer they would like for any particular deck that they might fight. Achroma at the time was kind of one of the big ones. So if you wanted to, you could Riptide into an Angel, which would then pull that out. So we're going to kind of go over some of the ideas of this particular deck. So as of right now, we have Shapeshifter, and when you put him into play, he's 5 mana, so he's a little bit slower to get out. But you pay 4 mana, sacrifice Riptide Shapeshifter, choose a creature type, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card of that type, put that card into play, and shuffle your library afterward. So, as you can see, that's a very, very powerful card. Unfortunately, it is kind of slow, because again, turn 5 you'll get it out, turn 6 you'll play it. Blue doesn't have a lot of ramp, so generally that's going to be the norm as far as that goes. Then we have Complicate, which is just a counter spell that you can also cycle, which that's the reason why I chose this over, say, Mana Leak, is the fact that perhaps if they're not causing any problems on their side of the board, I could just cycle it and still counter a spell and still draw a card out of the deal. Of course, you'll have your lands. The Bauble, mostly I use this as a means of putting things back into your library, like if they mill you or whatever, you can sacrifice this, put up to 1 target card from your graveyard onto the bottom of your library. So let's say if you did put in your Angel, they somehow killed it, then you can use this to bring it back to the bottom of your library and therefore shapeshift again into that particular creature. The Flare Husk, I will kind of go over why that's there, but what it is a living weapon. Normally you would put a 0/0 black creature germ token into play, and then give it this particular equipment, so it becomes a 1/1 germ afterward. But if you take that equipment and put it somewhere else, it will kill your germ token because the token itself is 0/0. And then another counter spell. So in this case, what we're going to do is we'll go ahead and play a land, and we'll drop our Bubble. Early on, I don't necessarily need to bring anything back, so what I'll do is I will break that and draw a card out of it, which will give us another. On turn 2, we now have another mana, and in this case we also have a Fabricate, which is you search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. This kind of helps you combo with some other things, or you can just pull simply one of your other things out here as well. So in this particular case, probably the best thing to do would be to drop a Bauble and a Flare Husk, which this normally would put in a token. We will just mark it with a red counter, and that'd be the 2 mana. Let's go ahead and break this and put this back into our library. And we'll make sure to shuffle that. Alright, and now we'll draw our card from the Bauble. And Polymorph. This is the reason why we have the Flare Husk. Polymorph is you destroy target creature. It can't be regenerated. Its controller reveals cards from the top of his or her library until he or she reveals a creature card. The player puts that card onto the battlefield, then shuffles all other cards revealed this way into their library. The goal of the deck was to have as few creatures as possible. Like in this case, I have shapeshifters, and let's see here. So let's go ahead and view our library. In this case, we have Chronotog, which can become a creature. It costs 2 mana, but he also taps for mana. What I use him for is kind of dual purpose. He becomes mana ramp at turn 3. He also becomes a creature for 2 mana, which then I could use for, in this case, Polymorph. Or the third ability you generally wouldn't use. Then we have the Bauble, which you've seen. Again, these will bring things from your graveyard back to your library, like if they mill you or make you discard one of the creature cards, then that allows it to go back into your library. Flare Husk is mostly used for Polymorph. Because again, with Polymorph, you don't necessarily want to hit a shapeshifter with it, since they can already do the ability. You do want to hit a creature. So Flare Husk does put it in a germ token, which allows you to polymorph it afterward. And then, as I said, with the Chronotog was very similar. It allows you to get that other creature. Blightsteel is the creature that I run personally in mine, but there are other good options as well. In this particular case, he's of course a 11/11 trample. In fact, that's indestructible. And plus the other perk too is that if he were to have got destroyed somehow, he will go to the graveyard, then go back into your library. So he basically is a built-in bauble. The shapeshifters, when these were in standard, this was probably the better card of the ones that are in the deck, because, like as I said, you can actually have different answers. Let's say if you wanted a Progenitus in there, you can name his creature type, and then you can pull him into play. Perhaps if you like one of the particular Titans, maybe you like Primeval Titan is a good example. You would be able to cast this to drop in a Primeval Titan, or any of the other Titans for that matter. And so that also means you can drop many different answers in the deck. You don't necessarily have to have just 2 creatures, but you could have maybe like a Reaver Demon when it comes into play, destroy all non-black creatures. Or Ray of Dawnbringer. Maybe if you just have the one Ray of Dawnbringer, then you could just do her effect every round. Well, I was thinking more so Iona. Maybe you have just Iona in there. You could say, well, I name angels. You'll find the one angel in your deck, and then reveal that and put it into play. And if you were to have dropped, say, Iona out, you could just call whatever color mana that they have, and then they can no longer play those colored spells. Followed Footsteps is more of a filler. It's not majorly useful, but it's just kind of there. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a creature token into the battlefield that's a copy of Enchanted Creature. So, like in my case, what I normally do, if I did have this in my hand, is if I do get a Blightsteel Colossus in play, I'll just generally drop a Followed Footsteps on it. If they don't answer, if I don't kill them with the first Blightsteel, then I'm going to start making tokens of Blightsteel, which eventually that's going to kill you. A couple small counter spells, nothing too major. Fold into the Ether was another card that they kind of broke pretty badly during the set. Pretty much, Fold into Ether, you can counter target spell. If you do, that spell's controller may put a creature card from his or her hand into play. So, normally what I do with this is if Blightsteel was drawn, let's say I were to have drawn both Blightsteels, and so therefore my shapeshifters no longer work, and Polymorph kind of doesn't work either, then I can use Fold into Ether to actually still cast those without having to hit 11 mana, 12 mana. So, a lot of times what people used with this one was like things like Ornithopter back in the day. Ornithopter you can cast for 0, but in response you counter your own spell, and then you can put a creature card from your hand into play. So it's kind of like you're basically paying 4 mana to put any creature card from your hand into play, which is extremely, extremely powerful. Fabricates, as I mentioned, it's more so just a tutor that allows you to look for an artifact, which can be good because, as I said, it can kind of help you build one of your combos a little better. Mostly what you would use for that is either Chronotog if you're looking for a creature because you have a polymorph in your hand. Flare Husk is the same thing if you need a creature. Or Darksteel Colossus if you currently have a Fold into Ether in your hand. Because if you have a Fold into Ether in your hand, it's not going to be useful unless you have Blightsteel in your hand. Or at least a Shapeshifter, but at that point, you may as well just hardcast Shapeshifter. The Polymorphs, again, that mostly is due to the Flare Husk. Then we have like the Preordains. The Preordain is simply just a way to dig through the deck. I needed a few cards filled. Like, if I were to have made any changes to this deck, I would probably replace, like, say, the Followed Footsteps and put either more creatures in there or more things like Preordain, that, like Serum's Vision as a good example, or maybe a Ponder. Ponder is always good, too. Anything that allows you to dig a bit. Those would be minor changes that I might make to the deck at some point. But if you wanted to make this a little bit more versatile, you can pretty much put any creatures you want as long as it's the only of that type. Like in this case, I would always name Golem. Golem would always bring in a Blightsteel Colossus, which in turn would probably just kill people. You could also, if you wanted to be a little bit cheesy, you can put in Emrakul. Name Eldrazi, search your library for an Eldrazi. He's the only Eldrazi in your deck. You win the game pretty much when he comes into play. Progenitus, another good example. So, I mean, there's different ways you can go about this. That, though this is my build on it, you can actually modify it slightly and make it a little bit more expensive, a little bit cheaper. But it allows you to basically search for any creature, so it kind of helps you build your combo very quickly if needed. But whatever creature you find has to be powerful and strong enough to stand on its own. If it's not, like Blightsteel is very powerful because he's also indestructible. If I drop him out, they can't really Doomblade him. So usually having some sort of protection or ability to stay alive would be ideal. That's why I said, like Emrakul, he has protection from all color spells, which again will make it a lot easier for him to have that survivability that he will need. So this is a very basic build of it, and as I said, there's a lot of things you could do to make it better. This is just simply my version of this kind of deck. And there's a few just small modifications that, like I said, the Followed Footsteps aren't really that useful most of the time. So all in all, they're kind of filler. I probably should just put more digging cards in there so I can make sure that I either pull a Shapeshifter, more land, or Chronotog or Flare Husk, and get to those cards a little bit quicker. Because that would end up giving me 12 cards that dig for 1 mana. Basically the 4 Preordains, 4 Baubles, and then whatever else I need on that. So I hope you like the idea of the deck and the concept. This again is hopefully to promote more people to build not necessarily super expensive decks until you win, but rather somewhat competitive while still being casual and fairly cheap about it. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching.